Many thought that Oscar Piastri's accident before the start of the Australian Grand Prix was simply a driver error on a lap with cold tires. But hours later the FIA began to review the car's data, and what they found could completely change history. Because at the exact moment of the spin, the McLaren would have released an unexpected power peak that not even Piastri himself seemed to anticipate, something that is now generating enormous tension within the team. Was it really driver error? Or has McLaren just discovered a much more serious problem with its own car? That is the question that now shakes the paddock, because if the data that the FIA is analyzing confirms what many suspect, the accident in Australia could be just the beginning of one of the biggest technical dramas of this season in Formula One. One of the points that caught the most attention was the behavior of the hybrid system just before the spin. In the initial analysis of the onboard images, there seemed to be a moment in which the car released a greater amount of electrical power than would normally be expected in a low-grip situation. That peak of energy would have arrived just when Piastri began to accelerate at the exit of the curve, an extremely delicate moment in which the tires still do not offer their full grip. If the power comes on too quickly or too aggressively, the car can immediately break traction. And that is precisely what some analysts believe happened at that critical moment. This detail is what completely changed the focus of the story within the paddock. Because if the spin had simply been the result of the pilot overthrowing, the conversation would have ended quickly. But the possibility that the car has released an unexpected power peak opens up a much more delicate scenario for McLaren. It would mean that the behavior of the hybrid system could be more aggressive or unpredictable than the team itself anticipated, something that in the context of the new technical regulations becomes an extremely sensitive issue. From that moment on, the FIA entered the scene to analyze the incident in greater depth. These types of reviews are not rare in Formula One, especially when it comes to systems as complex as the energy management of hybrid engines. The stewards began to study the complete telemetry of the car, the engine maps used during the reconnaissance lap, and the exact behavior of the power unit in the instant before the accident. The goal was to determine if the incident was simply the result of complicated conditions or if there was some anomalous behavior within the power delivery system. Within McLaren, this review began to generate quiet tension. The team is well aware that any doubt related to the operation of the power unit or the hybrid system can quickly become a political issue within the paddock. Formula One is an environment where every technical detail is closely observed by rivals, and any suspicion of a possible advantage or irregularity can trigger protests, investigations, or even changes in technical directives. Therefore, although there is officially no formal accusation against McLaren, the simple fact that the FIA is reviewing the data in such detail is enough for the issue to become one of the focuses of conversation within the championship. The context also makes the situation even more delicate. McLaren is not simply a competitive team at the moment, it is the team that has managed to establish itself as one of the great protagonists of the grid in recent years. Following the recent success and enormous technical progress of the project, the Woking team entered this season with a car that many consider one of the most advanced on the grid. The development of the new car was based on an extremely aggressive evolution of the previous design, introducing improvements in practically all the fundamental components of the car with the aim of maintaining the competitive advantage over its rivals. That aggressive approach is precisely what now raises uncomfortable questions. When a team pushes the limits of technical development to the extreme, there is always the risk that some areas of the car become more difficult to control or more sensitive to certain conditions. In this case, the power delivery of the hybrid system could be exhibiting particularly harsh behavior when the tires are not yet within their optimal operating window. And if that behavior is not managed perfectly, even a small movement of the accelerator could cause a sudden loss of traction. For Oscar Piastri, the impact of the accident was immediate and painful. Racing at home always has a special meaning for any driver, and abandoning before the race starts is one of the most frustrating situations that can occur. But beyond the emotional blow, the incident also had important sporting consequences. In a season that promises to be extremely competitive, losing points in the first race can affect the pace of the championship from the start. Additionally, the accident forced the team to face major repairs to the car, something that in the era of the budget limit represents an additional problem that no team wants to face so early in the year. FIA engineers focused especially on the behavior of the hybrid power unit in the instant before the spin. The current regulations allow teams to manage a large amount of electrical energy that is stored and released during the lap, meaning that the way that power is delivered to the rear axle can vary depending on the engine map, throttle position, and battery status. But that flexibility also means that any unexpected behavior can have immediate consequences on the car's driving. And in the case of the McLaren, Some evidence suggested that the release of electrical energy at that specific point on the circuit may have been more aggressive than anticipated. This detail is essential to understand why the case began to escalate rapidly within the paddock. Under normal conditions, hybrid systems are calibrated to deliver power progressively, especially when the tires are not yet within their optimal operating range. However, if the system releases too abrupt a power spike when the driver begins to accelerate, the result can be exactly what was seen in Australia. An instantaneous loss of traction on the rear axle that causes the car to swerve without the driver having time to react. And on a street circuit like Albert Park, where the walls are so close, that kind of mistake can inevitably end in an accident. This scenario generated enormous pressure on the engineers in charge of analyzing the telemetry. Every parameter of the hybrid system had to be reviewed with extreme care. The engine maps used during the reconnaissance lap, the amount of energy stored in the battery, the exact moment at which the system decided to release electrical power, and the way in which that energy was combined with the power of the combustion engine. In modern Formula One, the interaction between these systems is so complex that even a small variation in calibration can produce unexpected effects on the car's handling. Meanwhile, the first speculations began to appear in the paddock. Some analysts pointed out that the new power unit regulations, which allow a greater amount of electrical energy available, have made cars more sensitive to small variations in the accelerator when the tires still do not have enough grip. Others suggested that the McLaren could be using a particularly aggressive energy management strategy to maximize acceleration performance, something that in ideal conditions can offer a significant competitive advantage, but can also become dangerous when the level of grip is low. This is precisely the type of situation that in Formula One can quickly transform into a political conflict between teams. If a car shows technical behavior that seems different from that of its rivals, it is not long before other teams begin to analyze it carefully. The history of the championship is full of examples where initially legal technical innovations ended up generating protests, regulatory clarifications, or even changes in technical directives. Therefore, although the FIA has not formally accused McLaren of any irregularity, the simple fact that the hybrid system is being reviewed is enough for the rest of the paddock to observe the situation with great interest. Inside the team, the atmosphere began to become much more tense than what was perceived from the outside. McLaren knows that its car is one of the most competitive on the grid and that any technical doubt could become a distraction in the middle of the fight for the championship. Furthermore, the current project is based on a very aggressive evolution of the previous car, with innovations in practically all areas of the design to continue expanding the performance of the car. That approach has allowed the team to remain at the top of the championship, but it also means that each system in the car works in an extremely optimized zone where any small detail can make a difference. Meanwhile, Oscar Piastri was also at the center of the conversation. For the Australian driver, the accident not only represented great personal frustration, but also an uncomfortable situation from a sporting point of view. When an incident like this occurs, the inevitable doubt always arises as to whether the error was the driver's or the car's. And in a sport as demanding as Formula One, that line can be extremely fine. If the investigation confirms that the hybrid system released more power than expected, then the narrative would change completely, because the accident would no longer be interpreted as a simple driving error. As the data continues to be analyzed, the drama within McLaren continues to quietly grow. Because the team knows that the real challenge is not just understanding what happened in Australia, but making sure the car doesn't behave that way again in the future. And in a season that promises to be one of the most competitive in recent years, any technical weakness, no matter how small, can become a real threat to championship aspirations. The big question now is whether the Piastri incident was simply an unfortunate combination of normal factors and difficult conditions, or whether the accident has revealed a characteristic of the McLaren that has not yet been fully understood. And if that second possibility turns out to be true, then the Australia clash could have uncovered a much deeper problem within the team that could continue to have consequences throughout the entire season. Oscar Piastri's accident in Australia seemed, at first, one of those episodes that occur every season in Formula One. A spin in difficult conditions, cold tires, and a reconnaissance lap where the margin for error is minimal. However, as the data began to be analyzed in greater depth, the story was no longer so simple. The telemetry review and the FIA's interest in the behavior of the McLaren's hybrid system transformed a seemingly minor incident into a technical issue that now raises questions within and outside the team. Because in a sport where every millisecond and every parameter of the car is controlled with extreme precision, the possibility that the power delivery has been more aggressive than expected opens a much broader debate about the operation of the car. For McLaren, the challenge is not only to explain what happened in Albert Park, but to demonstrate that the car's behavior is completely under control. The team has built one of the most competitive projects on the grid thanks to very aggressive technical development, evolving practically all areas of the car to maintain its advantage over its rivals. That approach has been key to its recent performance, but it also means that the car operates in an extremely precise optimization zone, where any small detail can have unexpected effects under certain conditions. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.